Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Dead Malls, your one home for the coziest mall walkthroughs and everything retail related. In today's episode, I, on my way out to Pittsburgh, stopped through Elyria, Ohio on a mission to check out a gigantic mall, which sits dead and awaiting total redevelopment. A mall which seems to be more forgotten about than remembered. Midway Mall was once the beating heart of Lorain County, but as of filming this episode in June of 2024, my friends and I explored it in a ghostly state where we were the only ones in the halls. Oh yeah, and of course there had to be some nasty security at the very end. Be sure to stick around for that. But before I spoil any of today's episode, I want to take a moment and shout out our winner, who was able to successfully guess the next mall. Very nice job, The Endeavorist. If you'd like to have your chance of being shouted out in the next episode, be sure to stick around for the next challenge. Anyway, so let's get in here and tell the story of and see how Midway Mall was doing as of our visit in its final few months of operation. Midway Mall has been sitting in this sort of ghostly state now for a long time. I remember visiting a year back and it being the exact same way. And looking back at some of this footage, it doesn't even feel real seeing it again. I felt more like I was traversing a big empty render of the mall. Now when I walk up to this closed store here, the gate literally looks like some sort of 2D texture, really adding to the surreal vibes. Midway Mall's story begins on Monday, June 8th, 1964, when the board chairman of the Higbee Company, John Murphy, Sears Cleveland manager David Leahy, and the vice president of the Mall Development Company, Visconti Jacobs, Richard E. Jacobs, would first announce plans for a new massive shopping center on a 55-acre plot of land right along Ohio 57. To be anchored on the east end by a Cleveland-based Higbee's and the west a Sears Roebuck, this new mall development would become the largest in the state for a short time, before Randall Park swooped in and stole that glory. Strategically planned by the company to service the growing cities of Elyria and Lorain, and located at the midway of two giant interstates, with the soon-to-be-built I-90 just north of the mall and the Ohio Turnpike I-80 to the south. At the time, the only road connecting these two was Route 57, which the new Midway Mall, as it would come to be called, sat out front of. In theory, this traffic source for the mall was a gold mine. However, in the mid to late 70s, an interstate connector would be built just west of Midway, diverting travelers around the mall and killing off that source of traffic. Right now we're seeing the original mall structure, but there's actually so much more here to see, tucked away in a small little opening to the left of JCPenney. We'll check that out later though, as I switch up the vibe and put on a song a little more fitting to the 60s nature of Midway. You too can be swept away into just how eerily empty it was within the mall's corridors. Some of the only remaining businesses lie down in this old Sears end of the mall. And aside from my friends, I was the only one in the gargantuan empty structure, and it even began to trigger some deep down megalophobia. The reason why you can't look into any of these old mall stores, and I'm about to find out here, was because management's way to hide how dire the straits have gone here is by just putting up tarps and curtains, so you can't really look into any of the old storefronts sadly. But I guess their depressing efforts at sprucing up the window displays help a little bit. Timestamp and let me know down below though, which window display is your favorite? Or which empty storefront with decorations is your favorite? Let me know down below. On July 21st, 1965, ground would be broken on Midway Mall, shortly after JCPenney announced they were to become the mall's new third anchor, and construction would resume through the summer and winter in 1966. An August opening was planned, and residents of the area awaited what was going to become the most suave and hip spot along the Turnpike. Layout-wise, Midway Mall was strikingly similar to other Jacobs malls of the time. Eastland Mall in Columbus and Belden Village look very similar to Midway, as this was the time before Jacobs really started to play with their mall designs and usually just went with a standard dumbbell layout. Even though Midway was the first and would come before these two, it's clear to see that their construction was influenced by the early Midway. Construction continued nonetheless. Right now we're seeing what would have originally been the mall's Sears anchor, which still sits abandoned and sitting in total darkness behind that thin gray drywall. Now I can only imagine what it's like back there, as that store has been sitting dead for over 5 years, and was one of the company's largest models at over 220,000 square feet of space. That's like putting two Walmarts on top of each other, and leaving them abandoned for several years. And to think that all of that just sits back there, slowly decaying day by day, with zero AC, zero circulation of air. It must be a pretty stagnant, hellish, moldy place, but thankfully there's a wall dividing us between whatever sits on that dark other side. On Thursday, September 29th, 1966, after a month-long delay, Midway Mall would officially open its doors, premiering anchors Higbee's and JCPenney. Sears Roebuck would open a year later in '67. Junior anchors Woolworth's and Grey Drug would also open with the mall, along with a small one-screen theater called Midway Mall Cinema. At just around 700,000 square feet in leasable retail space, 30 inline shops would open with the mall day one, with some of those being Andre Duval, Baker Shoes, Bentley Ties, Lane Bryant, Park Lane Hosiery, Record World, Singer Sewing, and Spencer Gifts. Residents of the area walking into their new mall for the first time were instantly stunned by its ornate, charming aesthetics. Decking the mall's halls were dozens of planters, benches, fountains, trees, and even a giant planter sculpture in the center court, which featured a built-in watering system. Midway Mall upon opening was the place to be, with shoppers in its opening weekend totaling around 150,000. Before all of the big box and strip malls surrounded the mall, it was just Midway Mall, among fields and forests, so it really was Elyria's oasis along the interstates. Midway Mall would thrive going into '67, with Sears opening and completing the mall's layout. There wasn't anything the Thrivent Mall was missing, and a brand new Holiday Inn would even be built right outside the mall to bank off its success. Heading down to the old Higbee's here, I was once again surrounded by nothing but closed storefronts. And seeing this old Victoria's Secret on the left here, I was flabbergasted by what looked like a pretty bad water leak on the gate. And I guess even the artwork in the window can't cover up just how rancid this drippy, moldy mess was.
What happened to that Victoria's Secret? Look at this. It looks like somebody pooped on it or something. Beautiful artwork in the window though.
The late 70s is when the first changes began to come through for Midway, beginning in 1976 when Great Northern Mall would open just 10 miles away, which would become Midway's biggest competition in the coming years. Also, like mentioned earlier, an interstate connector would be built bypassing traffic around the mall. By the late 70s, times were changing, and the landscape around the mall was getting bigger and bigger. Soon West River Road and Midway Boulevard were expanded, and new retail plazas and strips began to sprout up all over the area. By 1982, Grey Drug, the first name to go bottoms up on Midway's roster, would do so, closing their doors. I'm not sure exactly what took this spot after that, but I do know the space was eventually taken over by Dunham Sports in 2011. By the late 80s, the mall was starting to be seen as tired and outdated. Its 20-year-old aesthetics, though grand and beautiful at opening, weren't really driving in shoppers in a newer age of retail, as newer strip malls and brands like Walmart moved in across the street, stealing away foot traffic. Jacobs would begin laying out plans for a new era of Midway though, one to modernize, flesh out, and nearly double the size of the mall, all of course to keep it relevant. I love this song specifically because when being down here on this old Higbee's end, there was just so much dripping water and buckets everywhere. The giant mop cart was out. They were trying to catch everything here in full force. And I just feel like this song and its tapping rhythms and drum beats sound very reminiscent to the tapping sounds that water makes when it hits those drum buckets, and you can hear it echoing down and back through these corridors. Especially in these small entry corridors, you could hear it so distinctly.
This wall scared me because when I leaned up against it, I found out it's not sheetrock, it's a tarp. Look at that.
I loved walking through Midway and exploring all of its hidden liminal treasures, and this song by the incredible artist Disconscious perfectly mimics the surreal, dreamlike atmosphere that clouded these halls. Abandoned children's play areas, forgotten about mop carts, and store after store of empty, forgotten memories. Coming up here though, you're gonna get to see the security office, and this is presumably where the angry security woman comes from later on, but I don't know, it looks pretty deserted to me. Before any renovations could occur, in 1987, Midway Mall's small cinema would close its doors for good. This wasn't the end of the world, however, as right up the hill behind the mall lie the brand new Midway Mall Cinema 8, which was under construction. By 1989, the land south of the mall was raised and readied for a brand new multi-million-dollar expansion, which would bring forth massive changes to the old mall. Construction continued through 1990, and a new name was moving into their new massive department store. But before I spoil that, let's see just what this expansion added on, as this small entrance that we went through near JCPenney would have originally been the mall's rear entrance, but now is a gateway to all sorts of liminal wonders. In August of 1990, Midway Mall would officially reopen its doors as a fully transformed mall. Gone were the 60s aesthetics of old, and in were the 90s vibes of new. Pretty much exactly what you see today. This new look of muted tile tones and palm tree dotted corridors wasn't all though, as a brand new wing of 26 stores and a 9-bay food court would open, bringing Midway Mall up to just around 1 million square feet in leasable retail space. Oh, and how could I forget, in this new southern wing, the May Company would open as the mall's fourth and final anchor. Now featuring over 100 stores and services under its roof, a full-line food court, and 4 massive anchor stores, Midway Mall took on this gargantuan T-shape, where the new wing of shops was awkwardly just smooshed on the bottom. In December of 1990, the new 8-screen theaters would open behind the mall, and in 92, Higbee's would become Dillard's, with the first of the mall's anchors changing names. Going into the 90s though, with a large base of the mall's older tenants switching hands, moving around, or leaving entirely, Midway's fate, despite the renovation, was up in the air. On the left, where you see the drywall and the tile peeking out from the bottoms, was once a line of 5 or 6 different eateries, which have all been completely walled off and closed over the years. And judging on the old ads plastered to those walls, them closing up must have been quite a while ago. We'll come back and check out the food court later, but first let's take a trip down the old Kaufman's wing.
Teddy bears there are. This mall has so many teddy bears. It's so cute. Of course, Bath and Body Works is the last thing left in the swimming pool.
But for the longest time it wasn't. Once upon a time, names like Suncoast, Aeropostale, PacSun, Christopher & Banks, and Claire's all populated the swing. But it does make me wonder, just how long is Bath & Body gonna stick around in this shuttering mall? Will they be the last ones to leave? On January 31st, 1993, less than 3 years after it had opened, the May Company would become Kaufmann's, with a new nameplate installed accordingly. In 1994, Woolworths would close their doors for the last time as Midway's last traditional junior anchor to leave. The space would quickly be renovated and taken over by a Best Buy in '95, which featured no mall access. By the late 90s, Midway Mall hit its peak with a variety of newer and older name brands, its giant anchors, and dozens of little discount shops, which were popping up all over the mall, filling vacancies. But as the years went on and less came back to shop and hang out in Midway's halls, tenant closures began to spread like a plague.
Ow, it shot me. It makes me feel bad for the people that are employed in here. It really suck to work in a mall that's crappy. So. plants. They're so thick and viney.
In 2001, General Cinemas closed the 8-screen theater behind the mall, a troubling sign of the times, and a year later in 2002, Jacobs would sell Midway to the Westfield Group, who we've talked about a few times here in the past, a company which notoriously did little for malls except stripping aesthetics and associating them with that god-awful name. Midway Mall from 2002 to 2006 would be renamed Westfield Shopping Town Midway, a name just as egregious as Westfield's ownership, who did little to help the struggling mall except attracting the area's first Steve & Barry store in 2004 to the old gray drug. By May of 2006, Westfield admitting that the mall no longer fit its investment criteria, or it was no longer in plans for redevelopment, would sell it to a group called Central Properties for $98.5 million. A price tag to remember, as from then on, the mall would only plummet in value. Once renamed back to Midway Mall, though, its first major anchor was already getting ready to call it quits. As I made my way back down to the food court, I found where the only other people were in the entire mall. It seemed as though while the mall itself was failing, the last food court tenant here, a Japanese restaurant, is thriving. It may have just been because we were catching a dinner rush, but hey, any life is better than no life at all. And the giant skylights were too a really nice touch. Sort of reminded me of Eastland's food court. In 2006, Kaufman's would become Macy's, with the store thankfully sticking around through the Mays merger and Midway's slower years. The same, however, couldn't be said when on August 5, 2007, Dillard's, one of the giant pillars of Midway's retail throne, closed their doors after years of slumping sales, and the space would never be filled again. In 2008, Steve & Barry's, which was located down by the old Dillard's, would too close their doors after their 4-year stint. The cinemas would finally reopen under new ownership, and the recession would sweep over all of Metro Cleveland, wiping out several big old malls with it. The oversaturation of retail in pretty much all of America would shine through the recession, and Midway Mall was just another symptom. Like Randall Park, Euclid Square, and Rolling Acres, Midway looked as though it could face the same fate. Dunham Sports would move into the old Steve & Barry's in 2011, and for a few years it looked steady. But as is the case for all of these overly massive, outdated malls, the remaining anchors, once havens for everyone and anyone, were now deserted and dead, and they too would abandon ship. Macy's, in their strangely located store on the south side of the mall, would be the next to go in 2016. Now down to just JCPenney and a shaky Sears name, Midway Mall would be purchased by the mall vultures everyone just loves to hate, Namdar, in August of 2017, who of course would instantly begin to neglect it further, driving it into the state we see it in today. Sears, a month after Namdar's purchase, would too close their doors in September of 2017, leaving JCPenney as the mall's sole remaining anchor. The old Macy's would be converted into a Johnny K's Power Sports Superstore in 2018, however, that is only accessible from the outside. Finally, on July 5th, 2019, JCPenney, after 53 years in their central anchor at Midway Mall, would close their doors for good, seeing no use in operating their underperforming store further. And Best Buy, one of the last traditional anchors at the mall, would too go dark in 2020. For years, Midway would sit completely dead, only ever populated by the occasional mall spelunker, who security grew to hate. Speaking of which, here's my encounter, where I whipped my camera back out to film this deranged lady who threatened and apparently called the cops on me, all because I was filming. And when she first approached me, I even put my phone down, and I was so ready to talk to her like a calm, reasonable person. But the first thing she instantly demanded was that I delete my footage, so here's that encounter.
That's so USA of them.
Put it away. Put it away, please.
Could you, back off, please?
Put the phone away. All right. You don't want to put the phone away. So
I'm leaving. I'm
Okay.
leaving. I told you I'd leave.
I'm leaving
I'm not
with you.
deleting my stuff.
I'm leaving with you.
Okay.
Put the phone away, or I'm going to call the police.
You can call the police.
Okay.
What are they gonna do? Ma'am, I said I was leaving.
You're filming.
But yeah, okay.
You're filming.
What's wrong
Put
with
it
it?
away.
I'm just heading out. Relax. I told you I'd go. I don't want any trouble.
Yes. This is Midway Mall Security. I have a gentleman that's here filming. He says he's leaving.
I'm leaving. Can you tell them that I'm actually walking out the door?
I did.
Okay, good.
You're coming to summon.
That's fine.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Now you want to start around to up?
Oh, why would I? I told you I was gonna leave. I have no problem with that.
Yeah. You want to stick around now?
All right, bye. Have a nice day. Thank you. Have a fun day on YouTube.
So what does the future hold for Midway Mall? Well, in May of 2024, the entire property and the land around the mall would finally be given new hopes of life when it would be sold to an industrial land developer who plans to convert all of the old mall into some sort of an industrial warehouse space. There's been several plans circulating around, but I'm not sure if any of them are final. As of this episode being released in late August of 2024, Midway Mall is still open though, still allowing travelers to explore its empty catacombs, and still awaiting a future. Dunham Sports, Bath & Body, and Finish Line are some of the last traditional names left, and are still there to this day holding the mall down. But with the future already decided, how much longer will they actually stay? Well, I guess only time will tell. One thing is certain though, if you really enjoy walking around and exploring these big, peaceful, empty malls, Midway is one you'd want to see sooner rather than later, as I fear one of these days the doors will close and never reopen. Folks, I want to thank you all so much for watching tonight's episode. Though the mean old security guard kicked me out at the very end, I still had an absolute blast taking a walk through this mall and exploring its many odd liminal sites. Like I said, if any of you are ever in the area, stop in and enjoy its ambient feels. Just make sure you watch out for Paulina Blart. If you guys enjoy my Dead Mall videos, consider subscribing, as it helps me out so much, and all future episodes will neatly be put in your sub box for you. Next week we'll be live at a mall of your choosing, but 2 weeks from now, on September 14th, we'll be back once again, this time to check out 2 malls in the lovely state of Pennsylvania, both of them completely empty and dead, and sharing the Valley name. Guess which malls we'll be at, and I'll shout you out in the next episode. But until then, have yourselves a lovely evening, and peace out guys. See you later.